All right, this is microbiology and bacteriology. This is chapter 7 from Nader. Microbes, pathogens, and you, 7.1. So let's take a peek at the learning outcomes. You're supposed to be able to distinguish between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell, identify the structures of a prokaryotic cell, and we can already do a eukaryotic cell from back in the day, and describe the structure of a general virus. There's also some prion information that's going to come at the end of this lecture that's important as well. So what is a microbe? A microbe, simply stated, is a microscopic organism. These things are very widely distributed across the entire planet, even inside you. There's some science out there showing that there are more microbes in your body than there are human cells. Not to freak you out or anything, but I'll just let you contemplate that. They're used to make lots of stuff. We use microbes to make everything from beer to yeast to, I'm sorry, not yeast. We use them to make everything from beer to cheese to coffee to human insulin. And some of them, unfortunately, are pathogenic. So if there are all of these pathogenic microbes inside and outside of us, how do we prevent them from getting in? How do we defend ourselves? The first and principal way is through barriers to entry, which is our mucosal mucous membranes that keep most things out. We have white blood cells that help us defend and other elements of our immune system, and we have elements that we call acquired defenses that we can use to help us fight against these things. So, not to suggest that all pathogenic microbes are bacteria. We also have protists that are microscopic, and viruses that are microscopic pathogens, and I'm sure others. But just to kind of dive into this, there are three basic shapes that a bacterial cell can take. The coccus or cocci, as they're called, are these round cells here that often form into groups with one another. They often aggregate like this, although all these bacterial cells can aggregate. Then you have these rod-shaped cells or bacillus cells. And finally, you have spiral cells, which look like these ones over here. These are super cool to look at under a microscope. But these are the three basic forms that bacterial cells can take on and can help you identify sort of what bacteria it is that you're looking at. So this is the anatomy of a prokaryotic cell, a bacterial cell, and this is straight out of your textbook, and it shows you some of the different parts that it can have. So here it has the plasmid. Let me see if I can get this into a pointer. Here we have the plasmid, and this is just a circle of DNA that the bacteria can use to exchange with other bacteria or absorb from the environment. Here's the sex pilus, a hollow appendage used to transfer that plasmid and perhaps other DNA to other bacteria. The fimbriae, or fimbria, which are these hair-like bristles that allow the bacteria to stick to surfaces, potentially to another bacteria. Going right up the other side, you have the capsule. This is protecting the bacteria from the outside. You have a cell wall, which we've talked about in previous lectures. You have a plasma membrane, which we definitely talked about in previous lectures. And then you have some nuclear material in here and ribosomes for this bacteria to make protein. Oops, and I almost forgot the flagellum, which it's going to use to for motility. It's going to use that to move around. So I'd like to contrast these prokaryotes with eukaryotes like you and I, ha ha ha. The main difference is that we have membrane-bound organelles. There are other differences that you should have explored earlier, but that's the big hitter. We have membrane-bound organelles, and as you can see here, we are considerably larger, or not we, but eukaryotic cells, generally speaking, are considerably larger than prokaryotic cells. And prokaryotic cells are a little bit larger than viruses, which is a nice segue into the next section here. So viruses are these acellular things which do not live independently. They live parasitically. They have a parasitic relationship with other organisms. Viruses are very diverse, but despite all of their diversity, they always have these two basic parts. They have an outer capsid, which is composed of protein, and an inner core of nucleic acid. Interestingly, as you can see in the diagram here, this is out of your book, by the way, 7.4, I believe. There's also some cool electron microscopy of viruses that you can see there. But viruses do not always have to have DNA. They can sometimes have RNA as well, which makes them even cooler, I think. But viruses basically commandeer the metabolic processes and machinery of a cell. Once they get in, they kind of take over, and the cell that they're inside of will start expressing the viral DNA instead of their own DNA. And obviously that's not great for the cells that they've taken over. And some viruses make genes for special enzymes that help the virus to reproduce and exit the host cell. A virus is mostly relying on the host enzymes, though, and the host ribosomes so that it can reproduce. And there's a big debate about whether or not viruses are alive or not alive. So some folks say that they're sort of like the next evolution of life, and some say that no, they're not alive. They aren't cellular. They don't reproduce with their own machinery, so they're definitely not alive. I tend to fall on the not alive side of that debate, but who knows? So lastly, we have prions, or proteinaceous infectious particles. When you think prion, you should be thinking stuff like mad cow disease or bovine spongiform encephalopathy, as it's also called. They're transmitted by eating the brains of cows, and they were once thought to be viral. They are no longer thought to be viral. But the basic or the most common method of transmission for this is eating the brains of another organism. So there's a bad problem when it comes to treating things like mad cow disease, and you can see what it is here. The protein that is gotten misformed and turned into a prion, because that's what prions are at their basic level, is just misfolded proteins. The one on the left is a normal protein that has a bunch of alpha helices. It's one of those protein structures we saw before. And the one on the right, it looks very much the same, but instead it has beta pleated sheets instead of alpha helices. So it looks quite similar to the original protein, but it's a little bit messed up. And it also will go around throughout the brain of the organism that it's in and misform other proteins, causing this prion to spread, and there is no cure for prion-based diseases currently.